Hi everyone, and welcome to Healthcare Process Pro. On this channel, I simplify healthcare process improvement, Lean Six Sigma, and quality improvement through practical tools, real healthcare examples, and step-by-step guidance. As a black belt professional actively working in healthcare and with over 15 years of experience, I emphasize lean thinking. So you learn how to think using lean methodology instead of just following and completing a template. In today's video, we're going to walk through one of the most important documents used at the beginning of a quality improvement project, the project charter. Whether you're a healthcare professional leading your first improvement initiative, a student learning Lean Six Sigma, or simply looking for a structured way to organize a project, this walkthrough will show you exactly how to complete a project charter from start to finish. By the end of this video, you'll understand what a project charter is, why healthcare teams use it, what each section means, and how all of the pieces fit together. I'll also walk you through a completed healthcare example so you can see what a finished project charter looks like in a real quality improvement project. My goal isn't to just explain the document. It's to help you understand the thinking behind it so you can confidently create one of your own projects. A project charter is typically created at the very beginning of an improvement project. It's used to gain alignment, establish expectations, and ensure everyone understands the project's purpose before the work begins. One question I get asked often is, how is a project charter different from an A3? I like to think of it this way. A project charter helps you plan the project. An A3 helps you solve the problem. The project charter answers questions like, what are we trying to accomplish? Who needs to be involved? What's in scope? The A3 takes over once the project begins, guiding you through understanding the current state, identifying root causes, developing countermeasures, and sustaining improvements. So while these tools work very well together, they serve different purposes. The project charter aligns the team before the work begins, while the A3 helps the team work through the improvement itself. Now, let's walk through each section one step at a time. Before we dive into each individual section, I'd like to start by looking at the entire project charter. Think of this document as the roadmap for your project. Before anyone begins collecting data, implementing changes, or holding meetings, the project charter helps everyone agree on exactly what problem you're solving, why it matters, who's involved, and what success looks like. I've found this especially useful when presenting a high-level overview of the project I am working on to executive leadership. I want to make sure that if an executive with no knowledge on this project reads this document, that they will leave with a high-level understanding of the project. This document should walk them through each of the steps logically so they can clearly see the need for the project and the overall goal of the project. Let's begin with the background or business need. In my opinion, this is one of the most important sections of the entire project charter because it answers a simple question. Why are we doing this project? Why is this project needed? Before leadership approves time, resources, or funding, they need to understand why this problem deserves attention. In our example, patients are frequently arriving to endocrinology appointments without their continuous glucose monitor or insulin pump data available for review. That makes it more difficult for providers to make informed treatment decisions and often leads to longer appointments and unnecessary follow-up. Notice that we're describing the current situation, not proposing a solution yet. At this stage, we're simply explaining why this project is needed. Without a compelling reason for change, It's difficult to build momentum for improvement. Now let's move to the problem statement. If the background explains why the project matters, the problem statement explains what is happening today. A strong problem statement should describe the current state using facts whenever possible. Try to avoid jumping to solutions or assigning blame. Keep your language neutral. Remember, Lean Six Sigma looks at gaps in the system or the process, not to blame people or departments. Instead, focus on describing the gap between where you are today and where you want to be. In our example, approximately 35% of all endocrinology visits occur without complete diabetes device data available for review. We also explain how that impacts workflow, clinical decision-making, and patient care. Think of your problem statement as the foundation for everything that follows. If the problem isn't clearly defined, it becomes much more difficult to identify the right solution later. A well-defined problem is often half the solution. Once you've clearly defined the problem, the next question becomes, what are we trying to accomplish? This is where your aim or goal statement comes in. I always recommend making your goal as specific and measurable as possible. Whenever you can, include your current performance, your target, and a realistic time frame. In our example, the goal is to increase diabetes device data availability from 65% to 90% within 6 months by implementing a standardized reminder and workflow. A clear goal gives your entire team a shared definition of success and helps keep the project focused as it moves forward. If success isn't clearly defined, it's difficult to know when you've actually achieved it. Scope is one of my favorite sections because it helps prevent one of the biggest challenges in project management, scope creep. Scope simply answers two questions: what's included and what's intentionally not included. In this example, we're focusing on adult clinics, patients using diabetes devices, and improving reminder and upload workflows. At the same time, we are intentionally excluding inpatient diabetes devices, pediatric endocrinology, insulin dosing changes, and larger system upgrades. Defining both your in-scope and out-of-scope items helps set realistic expectations and keeps the project manageable. A focused project is much more likely to succeed than a project that's trying to solve everything. Once you've defined the project, the next step is identifying the people who will help make it successful. Different stakeholders play different roles throughout the project. Your executive sponsor provides leadership, support, and helps remove barriers. The project lead coordinates the work and keeps the project moving forward. Your core team members help design and implement improvements, while key stakeholders provide important clinical, operational, or technical expertise. One of the biggest predictors of a successful improvement project is involving the right people early rather than waiting until decisions have already been made. This part of the project charter also helps with keeping accountability and ensuring that roles and responsibilities remain transparent. Improvement happens through people, not documents. Next, let's talk about deliverables and work streams. I like to think of this section as answering the question, what are we actually going to produce? Deliverables are the major outputs your team will create throughout the project. In our example, those include things like completing the current state workflow assessment, collecting baseline data, performing Gemba observations, developing standardized workflows, and creating educational materials. These aren't individual tasks on someone's to-do list. They're the major pieces of work that move the project toward completion. Deliverables keep the project moving from ideas into action. Once you've identified your deliverables, it's helpful to map out the major milestones along the way. Milestones represent important checkpoints rather than every single activity. In this example, milestones include approving the project charter, collecting baseline data, completing the current state assessment, standardizing the workflow, launching the pilot, evaluating results, and creating a sustainment plan. Breaking a large project into milestones helps the team monitor progress and celebrate achievements throughout the improvement journey. Large projects become manageable when broken into meaningful milestones. Finally, let's look at the last three sections of the project charter. First are your risks and barriers. Every improvement project will encounter challenges, so it's helpful to identify potential obstacles before they happen. In our example, we considered things like technology limitations, competing priorities, workflow variation, and staff adoption. Next are your measures of success. This is how you'll determine whether the project actually achieved its goal. I like organizing measures into three categories. Outcome measures, which tell us whether the project improved results. Process measures, which tell us whether the new workflow is actually being followed. And balancing measures, which help ensure we're not creating unintended consequences somewhere else. Finally, we have next steps and approval. This section answers one simple question. What is the very next thing the team needs to do? Once the project charter is approved, the team can begin collecting baseline data, understanding the current state, and preparing for the improvement work ahead. At that point, the project charter has done exactly what it was designed to do. It has aligned the team around a common purpose before the real work begins. If you don't measure improvement, you cannot confidently demonstrate it. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a few lessons that I've learned from leading healthcare improvement projects over the years. One thing I've found is that successful projects rarely fail because of the template itself. More often they struggle because the team wasn't aligned, the problem wasn't clearly defined, or the project tried to accomplish too much at once. Let's start with a few best practices. Begin by clearly defining the problem before discussing solutions. It can be tempting to jump straight into fixing things, but spending time understanding the problem almost always saves time later. Next, involve your stakeholders early. The people doing the work every day often have the best understanding of what's really happening, and involving them early helps build support for the project. Keep your project focused. One of the most common challenges in quality improvement is something called scope creep, where projects gradually become larger than originally planned. A well-defined scope helps prevent that. Finally, think carefully about how you'll measure success before you begin. If success isn't clearly defined, it's very difficult to know whether your improvement actually made a difference. Now let's look at a few common mistakes. Avoid trying to solve multiple unrelated problems within the same project. Keep your goals specific and measurable. Collect baseline data before implementing changes. Identify an executive sponsor. And remember that project deliverables are different from individual tasks. I'd also like to leave you with one thought that has guided many of the projects I've worked on. A well-defined problem is often half the solution. Taking the time to build a thoughtful project charter creates a much stronger foundation for everything that follows. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this walkthrough helped you better understand not only how to complete a project charter, but also how experienced improvement professionals think about planning a successful project. If you'd like to continue learning, you can scan the QR code on your screen for additional tutorials covering Lean Six Sigma, DMAIC A3 problem solving, and other healthcare process improvement topics. If you'd like the editable project charter toolkit that we used throughout today's lesson, you'll also find a link in the description below. My goal with Healthcare Process Pro is simple: to make healthcare quality improvement practical, approachable, and something anyone can learn with the right guidance. Thank you again for watching. Keep learning, keep improving, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Improvement begins long before the first solution is implemented. It begins with asking the right questions.